Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast, set at the intersection of commerce and tech. Your hosts, Sri Rajagopalan and Peter V.S. Bond, explore how brands and retailers engage consumers in a digitally driven world. And now, here are the CPG Guys.
Hello and welcome to the CPG Guys podcast. I am your amiable co-host PVSB, who moonlights as head of industry and client engagement at Flywheel, the commerce acceleration division of Omnicom. Joining me as always, he is the chief revenue officer of Think Blue Consulting, former CCO at General Mills. He is Papa Raj to pop star daughters Rhea and Laura. He is my BFF, my ride or die. He is the man known as Sri. So Sri, I saw you this week. You want to talk about what we were doing, what it was all about, and what the premise of this episode is going to be.
First of all, a big hello as we record this right after CAGNY on a Saturday. You know, it's been a hectic conference season. We started the year CES, NRF, FMI Midwinter. And then we went to CAGNY. So for the audience, our ever-growing audience, which now outside of brands and retailers also includes service providers, Wall Street analysts, if I can say so proudly, and also includes those that are not in our grocery industry, general merchandise, fresh, frozen, toys, apparel, agencies, news publications. They all come to us and tell us, thank you for what you do for the industry. So we want to make sure we explain things here. And so let me explain what CAGNY is. CAGNY stands, first of all, CAGNY, the Consumer Analysts Group of New York. It is an association made up of many or most of the Wall Street analysts that can range from the Royal Bank of Canada, RBC, Citibank, Morgan Stanley. That list goes on and on and on. Merrill Lynch, Chase, anybody in the business of investing your money. Pension funds, things of that nature. So every year in February down in Florida at the Hilton Insignia, we'll get together for 4 days, back to back. About 30 of the world's largest CPG companies come and present their outlook for 2026 and talk about how 2025 performed in front of the analysts. They invite a very small contingent of media, which we happen to be one, along with Wall Street Journal and a couple others. And so what we did this year is sit through the presentations and then get the chance to talk to senior leadership from many of those large companies. We sat through 21 presentations that are CPG, beauty, food, beverage, skincare, personal care, health and wellness care. What we are not going to report out on today or did not report out on LinkedIn was tobacco and the ingredient companies. It pretty much covered 21 others. That's what CAGNY is. Thoroughly enjoyable. More than anything, Peter and I have said, we're lucky to have this podcast because we learn a ton. Listening straight to the executive minds, the CEOs and CFOs is special. We're lucky that we get to do this every single year, the whole week. So Peter, get us going.
Yeah, and before I do that, Sri, I was remiss in not mentioning to the audience the importance of this weekend. A certain little girl in the Bond household turned 7 years old on Friday.
We sing happy birthday?
No, my voice is a little shot.
I want
to. You go ahead.
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Nadia. Happy 7th birthday, dear girl. Happy birthday to you. Make sure that University of Florida in March.
Yeah, she's excited about that. Yeah. So thank you, Sri. So it's birthday festivities. So I just wanted to mention that. All right. So here's what we did. We sat through these presentations and we did so with a purpose. We said, okay, what are the things that we as practitioners should be looking at? Now, the analysts are very different, right, Sri? They tend to look for, how are tariff rates and exchange rates affecting the business and factory productivity. That's not how we think about things. So Sri, why don't you walk us through each of the 7 categories that we use to evaluate the presentations that were in front of us?
So here are the 7 categories, and I'll try to get into each of them. The first one, as the CEOs present, the presentations are a good 45 minutes, so there's a reasonable amount of depth you can get and learn in these presentations. The first one is portfolio stability and innovation. As leadership speaks, we try to gauge the level of innovation forecasted in the upcoming year, what's up in the next few years, the role of R&D, how well informed the consumer insights is into the innovation pipeline. And that becomes our second criteria, consumer insights depth. Are they truly talking about the consumer with the command? Do they understand it? Do they have segmentation? Do they have cohorts? And whether they're publicly sharing that or not. They may inside the company. If they're not publicly sharing it, the analysts are never going to know. The industry, retail is not going to know either. The third one, very important sign of our times, CEO after CEO after CEO came up and acknowledged. Sometimes it feels that one of the only sources of growth left other than Walmart, Club, which is really Costco and Sam's, and the value channel, which is really Aldi and Dollar General. There's no growth left in the ecosystem other than everybody across the board reported e-commerce, growth in e-commerce, growth in the numbers. The growth rates are still phenomenal. No longer in the industry can we say the growth rates are phenomenal because the base is small. These companies now have huge bases. Some have multi-billion-dollar e-commerce bases. So we're looking for omnichannel depth of knowledge and what the CEOs and CFOs talk about and how they're going about a strategy. The fourth one we talk about is PPA. In these troubled times of volume and value seeking, what sort of price point architecture is there in the ecosystem? How they're handling revenue growth management. And we kind of club that together because RGM feeds PPA, PPA feeds back RGM. The fifth one is without AI these days, you cannot have a conversation anywhere. Senior leadership, with the rank and file, with the staff, with retail, with analysts, with reporters, with media, retail media. So we were looking for a depth of what are you doing with AI? Just be honest. Some didn't even talk about it, unfortunately. Then we jump deep into two very important things. If innovation is not strong, or even if innovation is strong, last year at CAGNY, everybody spoke of M&A is the only way. It's barely been 12 months. What are you doing with your M&A strategy? Are you reporting out against the M&A you have executed the last 3 years? And lastly, probably the most important one, organic volume growth. In a troubled economy and troubled volume challenges, are you simply taking it on the chin and saying, I'm sorry? Are you trying to find white space? Are you trying to find adjacencies and battling through this as though you want to get out of it? And then we weighted all of those equally and we came up with average scores, but we're not going to share today because we have shared these scores via the articles we put out every single day. We reported on mass market retailers. So if you missed it, please do Google mass market retailer space CPGGUYS or CAGNY, and you should be able to find out the summary of each day, very well organized, along with the composite score index for each company. So Peter, we're going to do this in 3 tiers, I believe. So do you want to jump right into tier A and who was at the bottom of tier C?
I'll mention to people, we'll have a link in the show notes of this episode to the MMR articles that Shri and I co-authored. So you'll be able to find them easy. So as Shri mentioned, we created 3 tiers. There's a top tier, a mid tier, and a lower tier. And unfortunately, the CAGNY event kicked off with the very first presentation.
Actually, Peter, why don't you start with who all are in the lower tier and what kind of score? Sure. What was the range of the score? And then we can get into some of those.
Range, we scored it on a out of 10. And the average composite score, the absolute worst was a 3.6. The top of the lower tier was a 4.6. There were 7 presenting manufacturers that fell into the lower tier. They were General Mills, Molson Coors, Mondelez, Vita Coco, JBS, the J.M. Smucker Company, and PepsiCo. And not all of them scored poorly for the same reason. I will say this. If you did no M&A, you didn't buy anyone, you didn't sell anyone, you're going to get a big goose egg. So that has an effect on your composite score. That being said, Shri,
I don't want to address that because, the human mind is going to think, maybe I don't need an M&A and that's why I don't do it. And you get a goose egg. No, you get a goose egg if you're struggling with volume challenges, you don't have a great innovation portfolio, and you don't have an M&A strategy.
Yeah, I agree. So let's just talk right out of the gate, Shri. It's the elephant in the room. I know it's something you want to talk about. We were both very disappointed with what the leadership at General Mills presented, and I know the analysts were too. So Shri, why don't you get into this for us, would you?
Yeah, as a shareholder of the company to the day, my beloved company that I worked for a little bit of time there as the CCO out in the field every day, was disappointed to see it kick off that way. And what I felt was a little sobering for me, and many of the analysts kind of said the exact same thing to us. And unfortunately, starting CAGNY that way, a decline of 8% in the share price right there on the spot after the presentation kind of kept the whole food sector depressed, I think, for at least 1 or 2 days, no matter who presented what. It is a little sad to see that. And I think the part that Peter and I concur was a little difficult for us in that was the general presentation anchored to a look. We're going to control the controllables. And there is a huge takedown in a surprise to the analysts in terms of the adjustment of what the volume results for the fiscal year 2026 will be and what the outlook go forward will be. It doesn't look like, at least at the surface level, that there seems to be a strategy to pull out and put some record wins pretty quickly. And then the remarkable experiences framework, which is referred to, has been in place for quite a bit of time now, 5 years, 6 years. I don't know, Peter. Like, if the experience is firing on all cylinders as was communicated, why don't you have remarkable results? So overall, I think I'm going to say it was sobering. Close that one out, Peter.
Here's the one I want to say about General Mills, and then we'll move on. It was the same song as they sang last year. They came, they disappointed, they didn't deliver the numbers. They asked for a reset after CAGNY of last year. I think the analysts were expecting to give them a little bit of a pass so that they could reset. And all I heard was, well, we're going to chase the quarterly numbers again. And well, we're not going to hit the numbers.
Yeah, publicly reported, General Mills is investing back in pricing to bring back volume, but we don't see the results in the volume yet. I'm going to wish the best because I am a stockholder and I have a lot of passion for the company and those categories that literally, Peter, during COVID is out and about 5 days a week in the field touching. So I hope we see better days.
We're going to talk when we look at the top tier about one manufacturer that decided to do something about the doldrums, and they're positioning themselves for the future the way that I don't think General Mills is, and we'll discuss whether we think that that's something that is in need of in Minneapolis. But a couple other ones.
The one I really want you to get into next is both our alma maters. Not that we're speaking alma maters here. They just happen to be the way the scoring came out. Talk to us about PepsiCo.
So PepsiCo,
I want to
there are a couple problems with PepsiCo.
Beloved company of Peter and me.
I know. So their big announcement seemed to be around the fact that they are repositioning the Lay's brand, fresh new logo. They're getting rid of additives, preservatives. But honestly, it wasn't a massive amount of exciting innovation. And they really didn't talk about what they needed to, which was they didn't talk revenue growth management. They didn't talk price pack architecture. They just said, we're going to splash a new label on our bags. And they didn't really talk about how AI is enabling them to drive efficiency in their advertising targeting or any of the business that they're doing. And moreover, their omnichannel understanding was mediocre at best.
Which is very surprising, Peter, given that PepsiCo is an omnichannel leader and has been for 10 plus years.
I mean, PepsiCo wasn't the worst, but they underwhelmed us, Shri. And I'm really, especially considered who their major competition is, who blew them out of the water, right? I mean, Coca-Cola, and we'll talk about them in the winner's circle. Coke had its game on. PepsiCo was on its heels. That's the best way I can describe it.
Yeah, and then the big effort now, one PepsiCo in North America. There's only one or two ways it's going to go. Either it's going to be a super hit by taking out a bunch of cost and operational layers and really making day-to-day operations a whole lot smoother, or is going to overcomplicate a very well-working DSD machine owned by PepsiCo in Frito-Lay and complicate it with a bottle-owned DSD machine on the beverages side.
Yeah. And Shri, let me just say this. There were others in the bottom tier, like let's take Mondelez. Mondelez had a different problem. Their PPA and RGM was spot on, right? Their problem was more that they didn't have any, right? They didn't have an organic volume growth story, which is a big problem, right? And they didn't really talk about how AI was redefining what they were doing. The most exciting thing that happened related to Mondelez were the protesters that broke into the
my God,
conference
Peter, that was a
and
little bit
jumped
of a
on
shocking,
stage. And they
little bit
were
of a
talking
shock.
about the rainforest in South America and growing cocoa and the perceived unfairness of the leadership.
Yeah, we learned that it happens all the time with Mondelez. So while I was shocked, I learned later on talking to the analysts that this happens all the time.
There's one company in the
Hold on,
lower
Peter,
tier
before we leave Mondelez, there's a couple things I do want to hit up.
Okay.
Right. So a couple of things I struggle with. One was no discussion of M&A, even though Mondelez is going through small M&As, I believe publicly reported all the time. Why wasn't it discussed at all? Was a little bit of a surprise. Didn't get into consumer insights depth in any meaningful way as one of the world's largest food companies who I know has a thorough understanding of the consumer. Speaking to that to rebound on volume growth would have been extremely helpful. Peter's already mentioned AI, but tough this year to not refer to your AI initiatives. Maybe there is none genuinely, which is fine. Then report against that. Mondelez is certainly great at omnichannel, but very few or no mentions whatsoever and where all the growth for a company sits. So at least CEOs say it again and again. That's where most of my growth is going to come from, and no acknowledgement. So in summary, again, I would say underwhelming like PepsiCo and General Mills.
Yeah, here's what I will say about everyone that was in the bottom tier. They all suffered at the hands of AI insofar as the highest score we gave on a composite for that particular attribute was a 3. They
Which is
either
actually
didn't
General
mention
Mills
it.
got the highest.
They did.
Because they did mention it.
Mondelez barely mentioned it. J.M. Smucker, right? Very strong numbers, but didn't talk about anything other than their brands, gave no reference to that. I will give J.M. Smucker one shout out. For the first time in 5 years, Shri, the CEO of Smuckers actually used the word, are you ready for this? Used the word e-commerce in his presentation.
No, it's
I was flabbergasted. But that was like one reference in 5 years.
Yeah, but I want to pat Smuckers as well as Vita Coco on the back because they really showed a good organic, even PepsiCo to some extent showed comebacker volume growth story, organic volume growth story coming. Hats off to JBS for a super M&A strategy. Vita Coco of somewhat of an M&A strategy. PepsiCo always has something going on, especially with the acquisition of Poppy and merging it in. Molson Coors had an M&A strategy. Let's close this tier out by discussing Molson Coors, which presented at the end of day one.
Bad situation for them.
I think they're
in the beer category.
They acknowledge that it's a tough ride in the beer category and it's shrinking.
Very tough.
Yet said I'm tripling down on beer. I think it did draw the attention of the analysts in terms of a shrinking category and you're tripling down. What do we expect? And so let me close out the bottom tier with who all are there. It's Molson Coors, General Mills, Mondelez, Vita Coco, JBS, Smuckers, PepsiCo. Let's acknowledge these are some of our beloved brands. We love you. Hopefully next year, we hope to see amazing presentations and results from each one of you. If you want to come on the show, chat with us, tell us what you're doing differently. You're always welcome to ping us and we'd love to have you and would like to dig in deeper further and tell your story to the entire industry that we reach. All right. Let's go to the middle tier. Who kind of is in the middle tier?
So the middle tier, we scored them between a 5.0 and a 6.0, and they are including Newell Brands, Celsius Holdings, which is an interesting company. They're a company that PepsiCo owns a piece of. They have warrants. They can exercise to buy out Celsius at some point. I wouldn't be surprised if that happened. Kraft Heinz, we saw Steve Kalehane from previously of Kellanova show up to deliver the presentation. Conagra Brands, one of our favorites from an innovation standpoint. Hormel Foods, and at the top of the mid-tier e.l.f. Beauty. So, Sri, who do you want to talk about first?
Let's go to the top. Let's talk about e.l.f. Beauty and what was going on with e.l.f. Beauty. So e.l.f. Beauty is a smaller company, obviously, compared to some of the behemoths like PepsiCo and Mondelez, but growing pretty fast. Great presentation in terms of the command of the consumer. You know, the fact that they provide a deep value for the consumers. excellent organic volume growth. If you want to dig in further, please go to our LinkedIn post. We've shared, and again, in the digital liner notes of this podcast, we're going to share every presentation that was made. So you can click on the LP one, but what a fabulous organic volume growth story. Portfolio looks solid across what they call eyes, lips, and face. That's, if you didn't know what e.l.f. stands for, that's what it stands for. M&A, pretty solid. Quite a bit of conversation on omnichannel. Very little reference to PPA or RGM. Again, maybe they don't need it, but
it's a beauty category.
Tell us your story regardless. If I understand it's a beauty category, but RGM doesn't excuse anybody. But Peter, the one that I missed out on e.l.f. Beauty, which kind of dragged this score down a little bit, was no mention of AI in a company where you think beauty creative. AI should be a backbone, shouldn't it, Peter?
Well, Sri, if there is evidence that it should have, all you need to look at, and we'll get to this later, the ultimate winner, the highest score of the day, competes with e.l.f. Beauty, and they received a score of 10. So we'll get into that. But you're right. Given their peer set, they should have been talking about it. They didn't, and that is what kept them in the mid-tier. If they had digged a little deeper and shown how they were using it, they would have been a top-tier scorer here. But that was a big one. You know, for me, the ones that were the tough one was actually, I think Steve Callaghan had a very difficult situation. He comes in with the announcement already that they're going to split the company in two, and he drops last week that, guess what? I'm actually not going to split the company up right now. I need to shore up the business. I'm going to keep it together. And he doesn't have a really great story. Very bad organic growth. He's not selling it off.
-3.5 is the forecasted 2026 fiscal.
And if he's not selling half the company, he certainly doesn't have any money to buy anything. That's the last thing they need. So M&A is not going to score very well. Did not talk at all about how AI can help transform. And when asked by, the biggest thing that surprised me is when the presentation was over, before they went into the other room, they took one or two questions from the audience, and someone asked him, like, what's the reason to believe that you're going to be able to turn this around, given that we heard that last year from your predecessor? And Steve said, because we've got really great brands. And I don't think that's an answer that analysts want to hear anymore, Sri, that we're going to succeed because we've got really great brands. I'll make an exception to that,
Peter. Lots of these companies have really great brands. I mean, we can't debate that. They've been industrial for years. General Mills is an example. PepsiCo is an example. Mondelez is an example. Mm-hmm. But tell us the reason to believe why your industrial, very large size brands, what is the new equity they're bringing that can add upon the equity that exists, which will bring back volume growth? One thing I want to point out, Peter, in that transformation, not to separate, they are targeting a $2.5 billion of gross efficiencies by the end of 2026, and they've committed to reinvesting $600 million of that into the Fix and Accelerate strategy that goes across product, packaging, pricing, marketing, sales, and R&D. At the surface level, we're excited about $600 million going into all of that. But there is a story of concern, at least Peter and I have. It's not a Kraft Heinz story of concern. It's an industry concern. The amount of times we heard leadership from companies pointing out to cost cuts, and these are not small numbers, 400 million, 500 million, 1 billion, 2.5 billion. Talent. Any concerns there, Peter?
Yeah, here's what I think. With respect to Kraft Heinz, I'm not too worried about the future of talent. If his first major hire was any indication, bringing over one of his Kellanova colleagues to run North America, I think we're
fantastic hire, by the way. I mean, he's bringing trusted people that he knows of. I mean, a good leader does that. We hope to see the results. It's actually a good start.
I will not be surprised to see more people formerly with Kellanova, now Mars Snacking, making their way over to Kraft Heinz. Sri, I think talent is a critical issue. But the one thing I do want to talk about.
One second, Peter. Sri. I want to just summarize Kraft Heinz, because of what's going on, right? They've come back and said, we're not going to separate the company into Kraft and Heinz. So I want to talk about each of the individual scores real quick and say what we love, by what we
Okay.
did. Portfolio stability and innovation, pretty solid.
Yeah.
Omnichannel understanding, they talked about it. Steve mentioned
They
it.
did.
Kind of told us the playbook. Deep conversation on PP, which is much needed for these times, as well as our RGM is informing him on the PGA. So well done there. Understanding of the consumer was pretty deep. Where I think there were misses is obviously in a company that's now looking not to split, we weren't expecting anything M&A, but tell us why. Tell us there is to be nothing.
Give us the reason to believe. Sure.
Especially when the Wall Street last year, everyone came and said, this is what's going to be. The analysts were looking forward to that. The second one is, where I think it was disappointing for me, was obviously when you're down 3.5 in volume growth, we didn't score it to 0. We scored it a little bit for showing the resiliency to come back and fight with the $600 million investment, but that was low. And the last one was, if you're going to go through a $2.5 billion transformation and invest $600 million, how are you going to do it without the use of AI? Gone are the days where you can use these management consultants and do it when you have something called an AI, which is infinitely smarter because of its processing capacity than you, Peter, than me, the CPG guys, anybody.
Yep.
All right, take it away.
I want to say one of the presentations we always love is Conagra for a couple of reasons. One, their innovation pipeline is always spot on to customer trends, or consumer trends rather. Our friend Bob does such a phenomenal job, like painting the picture of how consumer insights.
Can we talk about Bob Nolan for a hot minute over here?
Let's do it. He's a legend. He is a legend.
Dude knows the consumer inside out. And a little bit of a lesson, I think, this year for other leadership from other companies. If your volume's challenged, note to self, bring your consumer insights leader to tell us what is going on, how you're going to get command back. And did Bob Nolan do that or what, Peter? Hats off to you, my friend.
He nailed it. So I think Conagra suffered because they had no A story. They really didn't touch on PPA or RGM, and they really didn't touch on the omni-channel side of things. They tend to be very grocery focused, given that frozen is a big part of their business. But the one last one I want to call out in this category, Shri, is Newell. They were kind of at the bottom of the tier, but there's one area where they actually did very well. What was that, Shri? As I recall, it was their AI. They were definitely very AI forward. Do you want to talk about that particular presentation?
Let's get into the AI aspect, Peter. So, boy, oh boy, were we in for a surprise. Half the presentation was about how they're using AI clean rooms. The CEO spoke to clean rooms, Peter. I fell off my chair. They demonstrated a complete understanding of the consumer as a result. The fact that the priority now in the US market is going to be millennials and Gen Z because they're brands like Sharpie, Greco, and Rubbermaid and Coleman. They're 4 big brands.
Yep.
AI is informing them. That's where they need to chase. So they basically came out and said, all right, through our AI strategy, we're learning the where to play and how to win is going to be here. My absolute hats off for the simplification process you're going through, heavily led on AI, a project called Quantum Leap. About 100 active agents, agentic AI in action on innovation, productivity, investments, retail execution. Hallelujah and hats off.
Shri, I wouldn't expect you to know this because I think you were, I don't even know if you'd come to Virginia Tech at this point, but one of the favorite TV shows in the Bond household is a TV show from NBC back in the day called Quantum Leap. And I love the fact that they named their project Quantum Leap. So they kind of had me at hello with respect to that, but I agree with you. They did very well in that area. It's unfortunately for Newell. They actually had a good story, a half decent M&A story more than others. Their problem, they really were suffering from bad organic growth. They really barely touched on PPA and RGM, and their omni-channel understanding was not on display, right?
Why don't we wrap up this section, Peter, with a summary of who all were in this middle tier?
Yeah. So we started with, at the bottom of the tier was Newell. Above that, Celsius Holdings, Kraft Heinz, Conagra, Hormel Foods. We didn't really talk about them, and e.l.f. Beauty. We're not going to go into everybody here. If you want to know more, just read. They can read the articles on MMR if they want to get some more.
We have in-depth reporting out on every single one of these companies.
We did.
On LinkedIn, all you got to do is go to the CPG Guys channel, scroll, and you'll find it organized by day.
So let's go to the top tier. Let's talk about what we really like.
Let's talk about the bosses. And first, Peter, before you report out on who made it to the top and who's at the bottom of the top tier, give me the names. Who's in the top tier?
Well, I'm going to tell you that the top tier ranged from a score of 7.1 all the way up to an actual 9.0, Sri. Included in this, we have Utz, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Clorox, Church & Dwight, Colgate-Palmolive, Reckitt, Kimberly-Clark, McCormick, P&G, and L'Oreal. So the thing about these guys is there was one company, there were two companies, Sri, that got goose eggs on M&A and still made it into the top tier. That told us that they were on point everywhere else and where they presented, right?
So let's hit them both up first. Let's take the one up top, second in our rating, just behind there. We'll come back to who the leader was, who made it up top, but it's P&G.
Yep.
When their new CEO, Salish, stepped on stage, he demonstrated, this is not a dig on other CEOs, but man, when your CEO walks up and he can talk everything from your entire portfolio, in-depth AI models that they're creating with IT and informing all facets of the company. And he talked about it before he handed it off to their CIO. Absolute mastery of e-commerce and omnichannel. And when you have leadership that does that, it's going to permeate through the company. And then it's P&G, complete demonstration of consumer insights depth and a promise to sustain volume growth with crazy market share in so many categories that they lead in. Peter, the story of P&G continues to be one of the best in the industry, and they rise all the way to the top. What a great CEO they have found. Congratulations to him on his promotion there. Recently, he walked in and demonstrated a complete masterclass on how to get up on stage and what to talk about, and the confidence with which he did it. OMG, Peter, what do you think about P&G?
Yeah, I would say he's not one of those CEOs that just reads off of the slide. There were quite a number of them at CAGNY. He was not one of them. He could double click down.
He said your favorite word, UG.
Yeah, UG. He used user-generated content.
Can you please explain what that means?
So user-generated content is content that's not created by the brand. It's not created by the retailer. It's created by consumers. It's everything from people who write ratings and reviews on products that appear on PDPs, but it's also creators, YouTube, people are on YouTube and TikTok and Instagram talking, they're influencers. Those are all creating user-generated content.
One more word caught my eye, and don't call me petty for saying it because the business is much more than UGC in the second word. But when your CEO says my highest growth channel is e-commerce and he talks about UGC and ratings and reviews, hallelujah.
Yeah, that was quite impressive. Moreover, just the mastery of how they're applying AI to so much of what's driving success.
Agentic shopping, they're deep into understanding
they're way ahead of it.
Journey.
They're way ahead of it. And then
that's off.
Just being able to talk in depth about the omnichannel understanding and how important e-commerce was to their business and what the customer journey is like, really powerful. They didn't score on A, didn't need to. They've got the right portfolio for what they need to do.
Totally.
Strong on organic growth. The only thing they didn't come to the table with that they usually do, Sri, is price pack architecture. They really didn't mention.
Some references to RGM fueling strategy, but we didn't get into any depth or hear it. But still rising up to be second. Yeah. Because pretty much every other aspect of the presentation just blew us away. But Peter, who was up top?
Yeah, well, I want to say one more because you mentioned that there were two that didn't score at all on M&A. The other one was Coca-Cola. We really like their presentation. They have a really great organic growth story. Their numbers are just phenomenal. And I think a couple of you were talking to another CFO who just said, what can I say? They're kicking butt. They have great numbers. You know what? When you walk into this conference and you got great numbers, you can tell any story you want. But they certainly had a very strong, you know what's amazing me, Sri? The Coca-Cola, not even trademark Coke, because trademark Coke includes Coke, Diet Coke, Coke Zero, just the brand Coke. is 3 times larger than General Mills. It's 50 billion plus. That is incredible, right? The sheer size of it.
Why talk General Mills? It's like larger than most of the brands that
That's my point, is that was the number that was sticking in my head as being it's 3 times larger. It was
But
not,
Peter,
that was the only thing.
the statement that blew me away was the CEO walking up and opening the presentation with, "I still believe there's plenty of opportunities in the categories."
You don't hear that in a very mature
how
category.
he'll do that. He didn't say this is massive strategy that's going to last 3 years and bring a framework,
Nope.
yada, yada, yada.
Nope.
He said, "I'm going to make small improvements every day locally. I'm not going to fall back and category shrink or control what you can and give that as much. I'm just going to make marginal improvements, but I'm going to make it locally in every market, from manufacturing to the route, to understanding the consumer, to the price point."
Yeah.
Heck yeah, man.
And their in-depth consumer insights was so evident, Shri. Coca-Cola is a winner. They have been for the last couple of years, while a lot of other companies have been taking it on the chin during the pandemic and the growth challenges that have been experienced in store. Coca-Cola is saying, nope, that's not how we're doing it. We're doing just fine, and we've got a plan. We've got a plan. Absolutely, and we're activating it.
Absolutely. Some of the others in this category, let's jump into Kimberly-Clark, which scored very high along with McCormick. Why don't you start with McCormick? What happened there? What did we see?
You know, McCormick's a really interesting story. They scored pretty well across everything. You know, portfolio strategy is very strong. They talked about how AI is doing.
They dominate spice.
They do. But here's the one thing that people need to remember about McCormick, Shri. It's a contract category at retail. What do I mean by contract category? This is something that I'm personally experienced in because I used to work at Hart's Pet Care. And then when I was IRI, I was on site at Campbell's Soup at the time. Contract pet care, space in the store means they essentially buy real estate, not slotting allowance, literally entire linear footage of shelf, right? For years, back in the 90s and before, the pet supply section of the pet aisle was contracted. Hart's would just buy out 16 feet of space and they could merchandise any way they wanted, right? And the same was for Campbell's Soup. They would put it in those gravity-fed soup can holders, right? Well, guess what? Some of that has gone away. You don't see that in the pet category anymore. You don't see that in the soup category anymore. You do still see it in spices. McCormick is basically, they pay to own the spice category. They own that real estate. To a large degree, that's important. But here's what I want people to remember. The biggest problem with e-commerce is profitability, right? The way to solve the profitability problem with e-commerce on retailers is to make the basket more profitable. How do you do that? If you're doing recipes, for the love of God, people, make sure spices are in the recipe. Why do you want to do that? Because adding a little jar of spices takes that transaction from being wildly unprofitable to being wildly profitable. McCormick is the key to profitability in e-commerce in the food space.
Of sugar makes this medicine go down?
Shri, I'm saying that if you've got an e-commerce, if you got a recipe engine on your site, you better darn well make sure spices are a part of the recipe output, because that's what's going to bring profit to the category for all of these these food and beverage retailers. That's what I want to say about McCormick. Anything you want to talk about?
I'm just impressed. You know, it may be a contract category, but you have to retain your right to run the contract category with the performance that you need to have. They are dominating spices. They have been for a long, long time. The organic volume growth story is solid. They have executed very solid PPA informed by RGM. They demonstrated deep consumer insights depth. I mean, they're using AI to inform their strategies. The portfolio is pretty solid. The innovation that's coming out, especially the acknowledgement of how they need to raise the bar on heat or hot sauce, etc., was fabulous. The type of innovation they have in that category is fabulous. They recognize that Gen Z, that's what they're after. Millennials, that's what they're after. So McCormick rose way up top in the top
Yeah.
tiers. So congratulations to them. But let's jump into Kimberly-Clark.
You go there, Shri. That was your area of focus.
All right. So what I loved about Kimberly-Clark is the M&A that they have going on upcoming.
Mm-hmm.
I got to actually sit down with the Chief Growth Officer, Patricia,
Yep.
and Craig, the Chief Science R&D Officer.
Yep.
That podcast episode will be coming out shortly, but goodness, those guys knew exactly what they were speaking about. What I also loved about Kimberly-Clark, he might have been the only one, the CEO, that bought his leadership team and let the experts do the speaking. For example, Craig talked about innovation and R&D. Patricia talked about what's going on with brand equity, etc. And folks, that episode will be out shortly in a week and a half or so. Please do chime in and listen in. It is a master class given by the both of them, working together, brand and R&D, to put innovation and manage brands in the marketplace. Other things I love, super portfolio. The innovation portfolio is so strong. They are doing deep consumer insights to try and understand where they need to do it. And they're using AI pretty in-depth, Peter, in all aspects of engineering to figure out, I'm not going to give away the plot because I want people to listen to our episode, but it's going into R&D and engineering in a very meaningful way. When you hear the episode, you're going to learn how Kimberly-Clark blew me away. I mean, it's up top in the top tier for a reason. They've got a solid story. They're dominating what they're doing. Talk to us about what's going on the M&A side with Kimberly-Clark. Who's coming in?
So they're in the process of trying to be a little bit more like P&G. They are acquiring Kenvue. If you think about it, what is P&G? They do household products, particularly paper, and then they have some healthcare. Well, what does Kimberly-Clark do?
The acquisition isn't complete, Peter. I believe it's targeted for midsummer.
No, that's what I mean. Yeah. But my point is they're trying to be more like P&G in being more directly competitive across P&G's entire portfolio.
Couldn't agree more, Peter. I'm waiting to see the outcome of that, but they will be a dominant player. There's also a part in the podcast where they, the CEO also spoke to it where, they feel now they can serve the newborn with the portfolio they already have, the middle-aged person, health and wellness, and also the older person. In terms of, so they have now the journey, they can be on the journey of life, which is spectacular. Please do check out the presentation in the digital light and also the episode. Y'all are going to find that incredible. There are a couple more that we want to hit up, which we haven't. And let's talk about Unilever, Peter. What did you like about Unilever and how did Utz make it to the top tier? Let's get into Unilever first.
Well, Unilever just across the board, very strong AI, very strong omnichannel understanding, and a strong portfolio. Their organic growth story wasn't quite as good, but wow, did they know their consumer insights? I was the only place that Unilever came up short was talking about price pack architecture and revenue growth management. And I think they probably could have used a little more RGM since their organic volume growth story wasn't as strong as it could have been. But their numbers were very, very strong, particularly in AI, the work they're doing around audience building, targeting. I'm very impressed with Unilever. We've got some friends who work there. I think they do a pretty good job. Utz is a different story. Utz was interesting,
hold on,
right?
Peter. I want to get into you a little more. There's something very interesting I learned that desired scale innovation strategy, which leverages AI. He referred to the SASSY brand attributes, and I want to break down what SASSY stands for. SAS, that's why: science, aesthetics, sensorials, superiority, young, just executing in the marketplace. And then the other thing I want to mention, which is a conscious mention by the CEO, which the Wall Street analyst dug into, was 8 of 10 board members are new to the company. 9 of 11 leadership team members are new. Now, normally the knee-jerk reaction to that would be, my God, you have huge turnover. And he addressed it head on and he said, it's a choice we've made because we want fresh blood to come in, move these categories to be on hyper growth. And the way you do it is bringing people from the outside. In a large CPG company, Peter, how often do you see that attitude?
Not often, Shri. There are quite a number of companies we saw today that I would say, how can I be diplomatic about it? Their leadership is mired in a culture of all the leaders came up through the organization.
They know the brand.
Any new fresh blood that's come into that company, more often than not, come into the IT area, not so much the brand leadership and the marketing. And if they do come in, they're not there that long.
And
right?
Peter, before I leave Unilever, there's a couple of things I do want to mention. They have 16,500 patents, which are feeding their outcomes. Secondly, they have 180,000 content creators adopting AI in the process to do it, which means they have a 700% increase in the frequency of. The CEO talked about the number of posts being important. Holy moly, Peter. And this is what separates the winners from the ones that are in the bottom tiers. When leadership walks up and shows a command of how to execute in the marketplace, and also brings the leadership team to talk about expertise. And some CEOs simply just are P&L managers. And that I know you're in a Wall Street conference. Your volume is heavily troubled. Numbers alone aren't going to cut it. Strategy is equally important and needs to be put out on the high. So I really, really wanted to mention that of the Unilever team that was on stage. It was incredible watching that. Now did you want to hit up Clorox next?
I want to talk about Utz very quickly. Utz is a really great story because theirs is all about distribution, right? They are primarily operating in the Northeast, in Washington State, and they've just started to break into California. They just talked about all the points of distribution where their products aren't there. And all they want to focus on is, let me get my products into distribution. Once they're there, my products are selling.
Peter, what state are they coming to? California.
I know.
So you and I, when they're here in distribution, are going to go to a store. We're going to look at the portfolio and we're going to report back. I am thrilled. I have Utz, one of my beloved brands.
Why do you tell people
family.
why do you like Utz in particular, Shri? I can think of a particular building in the Bronx that is populated where if you're going to buy chips at a ball game, they're Utz. Who would that be?
New York.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't wait.
They are the official potato chip of the New York Yankees. So I'm not surprised.
I can't wait for it to come to California. The move to California is huge for them from a distribution standpoint. I can't remember the exact number, but if I remember correctly, he mentioned 300 basis points of growth coming via distribution in California. Man, I can't wait to taste the amazing portfolio that's going to come over here. I wish Utz the best. I can't wait to see it. One other thing I think will be fun to see in the marketplace is the launch of the Utz protein pretzels, which are on page 58 and 59 off the deck, which again, you can find a link in the digital liner notes. Boulder Canyon Chips is crushing it, growing as fast. I mean, they got a portfolio made for now, made for tomorrow in the tough category of salty snacks in an environment where health elements is coming out.
They're winning.
They've got amazing choice, super PPA and RGM discussions. So I can't wait for Utz to show up in California. All right, what do we got next?
All right. So Shri, I want to talk about Colgate because this was a very interesting story. You know, what I like about Colgate is every year they come, not just with their CEO and their CFO, they always bring someone else's different story, right? A couple of years ago, they had Brigitte King, their chief digital officer. They had an international person last year. This year, they brought someone from their Hills pet nutrition division. And they really painted a picture of they're subtle, right? But they say, listen, this is how we're using AI. And we're using AI to build audiences. And we've got clean rooms that are bringing all these disparate data sources together. The mosaic was so impressive, Shri. Colgate, their portfolio stability and innovation, spot on. Their AI acknowledgement, nothing better, right?
You showed a solid command of brick and mortar.
Everything. I mean, Colgate across the board, a little lower on M&A, but didn't need to be.
CEO that referred to D2C and that how they're actually taking steps to understand and manage to a channel where D2C is playing a huge role in every.
Well, you know, so their skincare business.
I don't care about D2C is a mistake. It's taking 50 basis points of growth. When you're starved for like volume, you're down -2, -3, 50 basis points is a gift.
Yeah, but
So
you know what? Their CP skincare business, right, includes a number of different brands that they sell D2C. And the reason that's so important, Shri, is they're using that proprietary first party consumption data to feed into all the clean rooms that they have.
17 clean rooms in play.
It's
17.
incredible. It's
Looking to
incredible,
scale
Shri.
further worldwide. That
Colgate, and then when the woman from Hills came, I've asked her to come on the podcast, so
mastery
stay
of the
tuned, people.
she knew her stuff inside out.
Wow, just such in-depth knowledge, consumer insights, how they're using media. What I heard a couple things, Sri. I heard that their conversion improvement rate, because of the clean room data and the audience targeting, 2x. They're
I know,
improving their
how it's
conversion.
is the media is now focused on moments that matter where people are shopping, as opposed to generic media across multiple channels. They're going where the consumer is shopping, which is awesome.
Over 80% of their media investment is falling under marketing mix modeling measurement. It's incredible, Sri. They've got a great story.
Congratulations
So
to that.
to everyone, Noel Wallace, the CEO, had delivered a great presentation. They have a great story. Kudos to our friends at Colgate-Palmolive.
I
They
do
seem
want
to
to
touch
do
on
a
everything.
special mention, Peter, to the upcoming innovation, whipped Hello toothpaste. I've never seen a whipped toothpaste, and I
Whipped
can't
toothpaste.
how it is. I will
I'm
be
excited.
that one that goes and gets it from the store first. I can't wait to try it. All right, now let's wrap up the top tier with let's name who all were in this.
So Shri, let me go through the top tier from bottom to top. Utz Brands, Unilever, Coca-Cola, Clorox, Church & Dwight, Colgate-Palmolive, Reckitt, Kimberly-Clark, McCormick, P&G, and at the top of the list was L'Oreal. So Shri, L'Oreal, yeah, absolutely. They weren't there last year. They are this year. But Shri, why don't we talk in generality? What kind of set apart the top tier from the other two? What were the attributes?
Let me ask L'Oreal PR. We're welcome to come on the show. Want to dig in further while you're up top? You're welcome to. Let's have a discussion here on all the amazing things you're doing. So what separates those at the top from those at the bottom, right? One, I would say leadership's dominance on the stage of knowing the consumer, portfolio depth, even in a tough environment of a volume challenge economy, finding white spaces, the Coca-Cola especially mentioning, I'm going to make minor marginal improvements, but I'm going to do it at scale, having that desire, thorough understanding of omnichannel, social. This is where people shop, even food these days. You have to be able to influence them on the purchase, even if they're not buying. That's where everything starts. We all live in a world of AI. So how depth is the use of AI? The winners clearly were separated from those at the bottom. Are you truly doing PPA and RGM, or are you just mentioning RGM informed PPA? That was another one that I felt. But most importantly, Peter, I'll still come back to the same thing. Leadership does make a difference. We saw some amazing boss leaders, and then we saw ones with the same story again and again. Looked a little lost, to be honest. That's what separated up top from those that were not at up top. Any closing thoughts there?
Some of the things that happened kind of behind the scenes, Shri. We had a lovely dinner on Wednesday night with two staff reporters of the Wall Street Journal, our friend Laura Cooper, who follows the beverage, alcohol, and tobacco businesses, and her colleague, Jesse Newman, who's more focused on the food clients. It was a really interesting conversation. Those two are legitimate journalists. You and I are not journalists. We are pundits. Let's be honest, right? We talk about this stuff.
Wait, we're not a hack?
No, we're not hacks, but we have definitive opinions. They write credible journalistic. They do the research the right way. They have ethical guidelines. Not that we're not ethical. It's that they have very strict guidelines. We found that out at dinner, that we broke up the check so that they could pay for it. Not only just between the two of them, but they each had to pay for their own, so that there's a trace to everything they're doing, because they hold their work to the highest standards of integrity, and as well they should. They are writing for arguably the most venerable newspaper in the world, from a business standpoint at least. So that was really fun. We got to award our dear friend Nick Modi from RBC Capital, having been on the podcast 5 times. We gave him his 5-timer jacket, his varsity jacket. The video is on LinkedIn. Please check it out. It was really big. Sri, what else from your perspective?
Nick, you're always welcome on the show. We love you, man. And let's wrap it up, Peter. I think we covered this pretty in depth. A reminder to the audience that please, a link to all the presentations is in the digital liner notes of this episode. You can easily go to our LinkedIn channel and find our review of every single presentation. It was almost near real-time dynamic live after the presentation. And again, we did an exclusive with mass market retailers owned by Retail Media IQ. 4 days summaries. If you want to take the shorter version, executive summaries, you can find it simply by going to Google and typing CAGNY space mass market retailer. Now, to all our fans, we love you. We want to thank our sponsors for the clicks, likes. Thank you for following us. This show doesn't exist without you. Do remember, we got a Shop Talk. We got a big party coming. If you haven't registered already, get in touch with us. We'd love to see you at Shop Talk. We got a lot of stuff going on as usual. We're hosting dinners. We'll be on our feet like we always do at these events. And then we have some fun stuff this week as we head to E-Tail West. And with that, Peter, a pleasure doing this with you, episode over episode over episode. Thank you, Peter. And go ahead, Peter.
Thank you, Sri. I do want to make a quick shout out to our friend Jeff Friedman at Retail Media IQ and Mass Market Retailer for asking us to write this series of articles during the week. That was great. And I am looking forward, assuming that I can get through this snowstorm that's about to hit the East Coast. I will join you out at E-Tail West. But if not, you may be doing that a little bit solo, Sri. To our audience, thanks as always. We look forward to speaking with you on the next episode of the CPG Guys podcast. Goodbye.
The content in this podcast episode is provided for general informational purposes only. By listening to our episode, you understand that no information contained in this episode should be construed as advice from CPGGUYS LLC or the individual author, hosts, or guests, nor is it intended to be a substitute for research on any subject matter. Reference to any specific product or entity does not constitute an endorsement or recommendation by CPGGUYS LLC. The views expressed by guests are their own, and their appearance on the program does not imply an endorsement of them or any entity they represent. The views expressed by CPGGUYS LLC do not represent the views of their employers or the entity they represent. CPGGUYS LLC expressly disclaims any and all liability or responsibility for any direct, indirect, incidental, special, consequential, or other damages arising out of any individual's use of, reference to, or inability to use this podcast or the information we present in this podcast.